Summer is upon us, and families in the metro area are figuring out how to keep their kids busy with activities that offer a mix of fun and learning. Get an idea of what's going on in our community that will safely give children the chance to explore, enjoy, and learn during the summer break. Coming up now on Living in the New Normal. Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh, and thanks so much for joining us for this latest episode of Living in the New Normal. Following a difficult school year, summer is now knocking at the door. And across the metro region, families are making plans to keep children busy. But how do we do that safely while giving kids the chance to have fun and to learn? Joining us to discuss that question, Dr. Benjamin Springgate with LSU Health-New Orleans, who is a public health expert, educator, and researcher. He directs the LSU Health Center for Healthcare Value and Equity, serves as the Vice Chair for Clinical Affairs in the Department of Medicine, and is the Chief Health Officer of New Orleans Public Schools. Also joining us, Kenneth Francis with Agenda for Children, where he is the Director of Policy and Advocacy, an educator who has taught pre-K and kindergarten, and has served as Director of School Support and Improvement at the Orleans Parish School Board. And also Patrick Dobard, Chief Executive Officer of New Schools for New Orleans, which is a nonprofit organization committed to excellent public schools for every child in New Orleans. He served as the superintendent of the Louisiana Recovery School District from 2012 to 2017. Thank you so much for joining us, the three of you guys have taken the time to talk about this. This is summertime, and parents are wondering, how can I keep my kids busy? I mean, it's been such a difficult, confusing year for everybody. So summer camps are actually out there. Summer school learning is out there now, too. Dr. Springgate, I'm going to start first with you, because while we want to keep our kids busy and entertained and to be learning and be productive, the overarching concern certainly is safety. This has been a difficult year. So are we ready to launch into these programs again this summer?
You're absolutely correct that safety is the principal concern for many families as they move into summer camp and into the summertime following this difficult school year. I think that we are ready in general. Most of the camps and summer activities that have been planned have been thought through well in advance. The organizers are taking these types of things into consideration as they plan how can they mitigate any risks of spread. And fortunately, we've gotten into the era now where vaccines are increasingly available, and that's really promising for this type of activity.
In terms of infection rates and children and COVID, this has been a rough year. We've just seen way too many people get very seriously ill or people die from this disease. But fortunately, children don't seem to have been impacted as badly. But still, they have gotten COVID. Some children have even died. So what really has been the actual situation with children and COVID?
Well, we do know that COVID does present a risk for children, and it's certainly not as common or as severe in most instances as the case may be with adults, particularly older adults or adults with chronic illnesses. But children can become infected, and so we really need to continue to focus on all the prevention measures that we know work, trying to reduce likelihood of spread by reducing the likelihood that people are coming together without wearing masks, for example, in enclosed indoor areas with poor ventilation, trying to ensure that we're doing the hand washing and other preventive measures that we know actually work.
So you mentioned masks. I mean, we've seen some new guidelines now come out from the CDC and welcomed by many, but some confusion out there too. Our children, we're starting to see some of them being vaccinated, right? From 12 on up now. That's actually happening. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. But for the little ones, we still don't see that yet. So I know parents are wondering too, well, if I send my kid to a camp, let's say, are they going to have to wear a mask all the time?
Right, and many schools have had mask mandates or had masks incorporated into their protocols during this school year. This may be a continuation of that. For indoor activities, a lot of camps will be having masks. Outdoor activities, it will probably be less so, and that's because we recognize that it's less likely to see transmission of this virus among children in outdoor settings. Children, fortunately, also have less transmission in general than do adults, but it's not zero, and they might still pass it on to an adult. So these types of mitigation efforts do make a difference.
So bottom line, though, you as a physician and what you've seen out there in community health, you feel comfortable in now having kids this summer like they weren't able to do last summer, go into a summer camp type of program? Do you feel
Yes,
it's okay?
I think that we can feel reasonably confident in that because many of these camps have taken the efforts that are necessary to plan and prepare. They're following the CDC guidance or other local health guidance. They're taking the additional steps that are necessary to ensure that this is safe. And we want our children to have the opportunity to have a fun summer, to be around other kids, which is important for their emotional and psychological well-being and development, and they need to be able to run around and play.
Okay, Patrick, let's go on over to you because learning also is obviously very important for children. We want them to grow emotionally and psychologically and to have fun, to be a kid. But this past year has really been kind of hard on a lot of children to keep up with the learning that we sort of expect them to do. So what kind of learning loss have we seen?
Well, it's still a little early to tell. One of the big indicators will be the results that schools are going to receive. Some of them have already received it for high school on the state LEAP assessments, the annual assessments that the Department of Education gives annually. That's one of the reasons we pushed that the assessments should happen, but be low stakes, not high stakes. So it shouldn't be tied to any retention of students or anything as far as school accountability. But with that, once we get that data, we anticipate from a lot of internal data that schools have had shared with us recently that there's significant learning loss. And so that made us realize we needed to do something over the summer months in order to help mitigate that and then really try to get students on a better foot starting next fall.
So are you seeing that there is more registration or more interest among parents and also educators to get kids in classrooms to go through learning experiences this summer?
Absolutely. We've seen the numbers double, almost triple in some instances as far as the amount of individuals that are interested in pursuing summer school for their children, as well as having enrichment activities. And so that was one of the reasons our team at NSNO decided to launch our summer grant for schools, where we have over, I believe, about 72 schools that are participating out of 81 in the city, which is a phenomenal, outreach and response. And of that, all of those schools are going to provide, transportation for families to and from summer school. They're going to partner with local community groups to do enrichment activities. And they're also committed to having what I'm calling a through line between the academic baselines they're trying to reestablish and make sure that that academic learning carries over into the fall and the continuing school year. And so we're excited. There's a lot of demand. One of the concerns we had was around teacher burnout. And when we talked to some of the schools about the grants that we put out there, one of the things is that they did say that the funding, the extra funding, could really help with motivation. And a lot of teachers, they want to do it. And so most of the programs are going to be about 4 to 6 weeks. And so they'll still have some time to recuperate over the summer months and then be able to get back in school full time. But it just shows the dedication of our teachers in New Orleans that overwhelmingly they realized that this past year was hopefully an anomaly, and that they really are going to give everything they can and then some in order to make sure our students' learning loss is not as acute, and that they figure out where to meet the kids and then give them a really good summer.
So the teachers need their summer vacation as well. So the funding that you guys offered, how many schools took you up on it, would you say?
Yeah, it was 72 schools that took us up on it. It's a little over $1.5 million. The grants range from about $15,000 to $30,000 per school. And one of the big things is I was a little skeptical at the outset when my team presented this several months back, and they were like, look, let's offer some grant opportunities for summer school. And then on the heels of the federal government announcing the large needed ESSER package, the stimulus packages, didn't know if the schools would take advantage of grants from that range. And when we reached out, I literally called almost 30 school leaders myself. And across the board, they all emphatically said yes. One of the big reasons was the money that they're promised from the federal government, they haven't really established the rules on how you can spend it yet. And so instead of just waiting around to get the money, it might be next summer before they really know how they can use it. And so once again, it shows how partners like NSNO, with our flexibility, can come in and immediately help. So the response by schools was phenomenal. To have 72 out of 81 respond and apply, and all of them receive grants, we feel really good about that.
Yeah, that's a lot of school offerings. And of course, you work closely with the charter schools, but the school systems across, our region, I'm sure, are offering summer school programs too. Individuals should just look at, their respective school systems. That really is a really amazing response, and it does demonstrate the need that educators feel that our kids do need a little bit more help. And Kenny, let's go on over and talk to you right now. With Agenda for Children, you all work closely with children, with parents, with groups, throughout the region. What have you all seen in terms of impact on kids and families over this past year, and how these changes in learning and socialization have occurred?
And so the groups that we work with most closely is the early childhood context, so working with children birth to 4. And what we saw at the beginning of COVID is a lot of honest fear from parents of putting their kids into a childcare context, because thinking about what a childcare center looks like, social distancing isn't really possible. And so what we really focused on at the beginning of the pandemic was really ensuring that the childcare providers that we work with across the state had access to the materials that they needed to ensure safety. So things like sanitation materials, things like PPE. One of the first things we focused on at the onset of the pandemic was pushing the state of Louisiana to purchase PPE materials for childcare providers centrally, because what we found was childcare providers were trying to compete with hospitals and other sort of entities that have enormous buying power, whereas a single childcare center can't possibly get the resources they need compared to that. And so that really focusing on PPE and sanitation and making sure that everyone understood the new regulations that were being put in place to ensure safety during the pandemic, things like enhanced sanitation, things like enhanced cleaning, things like changing their arrival and drop-off procedures to ensure that extra adults weren't going into the building that didn't need to, things like lowering the sizes of the groups. So those types of things are what we focused on. And then what we spent a huge time in the summer doing is really focusing on testing at a time that testing wasn't readily available. We started a partnership with an organization called New Orleans, which was offering initially community-based COVID testing for childcare workers specifically, but then we were able to eventually provide on-site childcare testing where they were going to the centers, testing everybody on-site, including testing members of the community that were coming in. And all of this was in the effort to rebuild confidence of parents in being able to send their kids to a childcare setting, because we know that childcare, and specifically early childhood education, is really vital to not just the healthy development of children, but also our workforce. If you have children, we live in a reality where over 80% of adults in Louisiana who have children, all available caregivers are in the workforce. And so it's not like 40, 50 years ago where you had, in most families, one parent staying home able to provide that care. Most people have to go to work, and so most people have to send their kid to some sort of childcare. And a lot of parents simply just didn't feel safe. And so what we saw throughout the pandemic was ever-decreasing numbers of enrollment in childcare centers just due to safety concerns. And what we have been helping providers do across the state is really get the resources needed to be able to have the systems in place to rebuild confidence amongst parents of sending, because we know how important this care is. Over 90% of brain development happens between the time a child is born and by the time they're 4 years old. And so we're missing out on some of those key stages when kids are just sort of sitting at home, not being socialized, not learning those pre-literacy concepts, not learning those pre-mathematical concepts. Sort of anecdotally, my wife is an early childhood educator. She teaches first grade this year, and she's been doing it virtually. And it's been interesting to watch her go through the challenges with her students, because her students came into her as kindergartners still, because they left school in person in the middle of kindergarten last year. And now they're in first grade going into second grade, and developmentally, a lot of kids in her class are still very much mid-year kindergarten students. And that's just sort of a reality that she is working on along with their parents and with their school of how to make up that learning loss that Patrick was just talking about. And so this summer is going to be a really important time to try to not exacerbate what we know has already been probably a significant slide in developmental progress, both on the social emotional side as well as academically. And we know that summer slide is a thing that we worry about every year, and this year particularly, we could have a reality where kids fall even further behind, and that's obviously what everyone's trying to avoid.
Absolutely. So, unlike last summer, this year there are numerous opportunities for summer fun and learning in the metro area. WYES Outreach Manager Monica Turner took a look into what families might consider for their youngsters.
Kids across New Orleans are ready to be kids. Parents want to make sure their children can safely have fun, learn, and explore during the summer months. There's a variety of choices in the greater New Orleans area that can help keep kids busy this summer. Day camps offer activities ranging from sports and swimming, to music and performing arts, to science and nature, including zoo experiences, and technology, with STEM camps offering coding, robotics, environmental science, even space. Budding chefs can have a culinary experience. And for children with special challenges and disabilities, there are some overnight camps. Because of the limitations caused by COVID, many camps will have limited enrollment. Safety comes first, of course. Some questions you might ask that align with CDC guidance include: has staff been trained on CDC COVID protocols? Are masks required? Will there be temperature checks? Will my child be in the same group with the same counselor or teachers through the camp session? Are there indoor-outdoor options? Will my child have to bring lunch or snacks or their own drink? What is the hand washing and disinfecting policy? How will the area be ventilated? If transportation is provided, will it follow the same safety procedures? What is the policy for handling a positive COVID case? The same questions will apply to overnight camps, plus medical staff availability is a must. Summer camps are ready to offer kids a fun experience after missing the chance to welcome youngsters last year. And school systems are also providing programs that can help students catch up on their studies, such as the Jefferson Parish School System's Summer Bridge Enrichment Program. Opportunities are plentiful this year. To help you find out what might work for your family, you can check out the community or parish section at NOLA.com. And these websites might be helpful as well: NewOrleansMom.com, MacaroniKids.com. For summer camps in the state of Louisiana, you can go to summercamps.com or kidscamps.com. Studies show that the summer camp experience can be productive and help a child grow. And after a sometimes confusing school year for parents and kids, this summer break holds the possibility of a time for fun and fulfillment.
And we hope that the kids all over do have that time for fun and fulfillment and, and play and learning, too. Dr. Springgate, let's go on over to you. And that, by the way, once again, was Monica Turner, our outreach manager here at WYES. A lot out there, as Monica pointed out. I mean, it is happening this summer like it didn't happen last summer where, everything was really shut down. Overriding concern, again, is safety. And you had mentioned vaccines. Let's talk a little bit more about vaccines right now. How do we stand statewide in terms of vaccination, with those who have been eligible thus far?
Well, we know that there are certainly many people who have taken advantage of vaccines among the adults who have had the opportunity so far, but we're still looking towards a much larger proportion, hopefully taking advantage of that. In the younger age groups now, those vaccines have only been available for a few weeks. First, it started with 16 and 17-year-olds with the Pfizer vaccine, and now most recently, just within the last week or so, 12 to 15-year-olds have been able to use the Pfizer vaccine. So this is really promising. We're really hopeful that many children will be able to come in and get these vaccines with the support of their parents.
So Pfizer right now for 12 years old up. What about the other vaccines that we have here, Moderna and J&J? Will that be on board too, do you think, soon?
Well, they do not yet have the approval, so I imagine that they will be seeking to test those and ensure that they get that approval from the Food and Drug Administration. At this time, it's the Pfizer vaccine, which is 2 doses staged 3 weeks apart. It's safe, it's effective, and this is something that really is going to be very helpful for us in terms of allowing the kids to get vaccinated.
And where can parents or guardians take children to get the vaccination? Is it just their pediatrician, their doctor, or are there going to be mass vaccination sites for kids? How is that being handled?
A lot of times it's the larger health organizations that are offering this. So right now, groups like the LSU Health Network, Louisiana Children's Medical Center, and other larger organizations are offering these right now. People can call up the vaccine hotlines at each of these organizations. You can also call your pediatrician, of course. Most of the pediatricians' offices are not outfitted with the appropriate refrigeration for these types of vaccines. And then certainly some of the smaller clinics have begun doing outreach events too, in partnership, for example, with the City of New Orleans and municipal governments around the area.
Okay, now for kids under 12, what is the vaccine horizon for that?
Well, we anticipate that the Pfizer vaccine will be deemed potentially for approval as early as September. So they're still gathering data about the safety and efficacy in that age group between 2 and 11. And hopefully they'll have that information this summer. They will apply potentially as early as September. And that may be something that could be available for all of our 2-year-olds to 11-year-olds at that time.
Safety is, of course, something that, once again, that word safety, and certainly with these vaccines and having your child vaccinated, you really want to make sure that this is really a safe process. Is this the same dosage that adults are getting?
So it's a slightly lower dose for the 12-year-olds to 15-year-olds, and as well as 16 and 17-year-olds. They get 0.3 milliliters. The adults get 0.5 milliliters. This is thought to be an exceptionally safe vaccine based on the data that we have at this time. It's known to be effective in preventing severe illness as well as preventing deaths. We really want to encourage families to take advantage of this. Certainly ask questions of your pediatricians, but this is a real opportunity to help check this pandemic and really get back to normal.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Dr. Springgate. And let's go on over back to you, Patrick, and also Kenny. I just kind of want to throw the questions out there just generally. What advice do you have for parents now? Parents have been so cautious and worried about their kids, but advice to get their kids back into what we would consider, pre-pandemic normal situations, to introduce them back into, maybe school settings. What advice do you have for parents on that? Patrick, let's start with you.
Well, my advice would be, one, ask questions. We want you to feel comfortable with the decisions that you're making for your children. 2, know that school leaders and teachers and all of the staff, they're being extremely cautious. And they've actually been at this for a while now, actually being in the building and being close to other individuals, yet safe. And so I would just say, make sure that you're engaged. Don't feel as though there's something that you can't ask, but also know that schools are very conscious of concerns. They're conscious of worry, and they're trying to do everything they can in their power to make the environment feel welcoming, to be safe, and to make certain that they're hearing the families and what they need and trying to meet those needs.
Kenny, anything to add to that?
I would echo both of what Patrick just said about asking questions and about trusting that the professionals working in your child's school have really been focusing on how to ensure that your children are safe as they return. And another thing I would say is to take your time and really pay attention to how you're feeling about this. I think something that we haven't talked enough about is that we're all going to have different levels of comfortability sort of getting back to normal, and that's going to be the same thing's going to be true for kids. There's going to be some scenarios in which your kid's going to feel very comfortable in. There's some scenarios in which your child is not going to feel comfortable in, just like you are. I myself have been experiencing this where, one trip to the grocery store feels very different than another, depending on whether I'm wearing my mask, whether when I was feeling fully vaccinated or not. And so it's, I think, really paying attention to how your child is feeling and what they're comfortable with, and not rushing it, but also letting them communicate to you, because the kids can communicate to you what they need and when they need it. And so really just being in tune with your child. I think the other is letting them be kids. Following the science and knowing that if we're wearing masks, if people are vaccinated, that the science is telling us that it's safe, and that if your kids want to go outside and play and hang out with friends, letting them have some semblance of normalcy in childhood in the ways that are safe based upon what we know right now.
And Patrick, the kids have been split between in-person school, virtual school, but we've seen extracurriculars really, really cut back. So how important will that be to introduce back into the regular school, experience?
Well, it's going to be extremely important to bring back extracurricular activities. Over the last decade, that's been one of those areas where, for various reasons in various districts around the state, have made significant budget cuts. And I think people are starting to realize the extreme importance of having kids play, having kids be creative and be outside. And I think with all of the data showing from the healthcare perspective that the more that we're outside, the safer it is. And so I think taking this horrible crisis and then leveraging the crisis for areas that we really want to have more focus on, which is people getting outside, young people running around, being in better shape, not being on a camera, in front of a camera, on a computer all day long without that type of interaction. That for a lot of us growing up, that was a normal thing. If you ask me, recess was my second favorite subject after social studies. And
I remember that.
I could remember having just the playtime and just really that release, and then art, and then music, and which are things that are, culturally strong in our city, but have sort of been playing second and third fiddle in a lot of instances in schools. And so to really elevate those during the summer, it's a great opportunity. And our schools are definitely taking advantage of it, and a lot of our partners are taking advantage of it. So we're excited about the opportunity that lay before us.
And attendance also is really important, because I know we've seen, in this past year, particularly in Orleans Parish, I've seen that, kids not missing maybe 10 days of school, and it's really important for kids to go to school. Go ahead.
Yes, we that's one of the big things, and I'm glad you brought that up. We're stressing the parents too. Some parents have kept their kids out of in-person learning, and understandably so, since last year. And the summer could be a great opportunity to almost test run what it's like to be back in the building. It's a shorter window. It's really not as stressful, hopefully, for families. And so we encourage them to take their time, but it's also a time for if some kids, or a number of kids, who have not shown up on any roles, they have not been in person, nor have they been online. Yeah. And so hopefully if families are listening to this show, we would encourage you to please get back in touch with your school. Make sure that you're engaging your kids and allow them the opportunity to get caught back up in school. Because one of the biggest things we're worried about is that we're underestimating the number of kids that actually have not been in school. And I heard from one leader recently who also shared with me his concern that the quality of school just hasn't been that great this year. So people may have been online every day and been in person as much as possible, yet with all of the stress, the trauma, all of the challenges we face, it's been really hard for people to focus at the level that they have in the past. And so we're encouraging people to take those steps, to go forward, to show a lot of grace to each other, to show a lot of patience with each other. And we really feel like we can make this summer a great springboard to an even better fall.
Okie doke. And some final thoughts. Let's go over to you, Dr. Springgate. Just some final advice that you would give to parents right now.
Take advantage of the opportunity to allow your children to get outside this summer if possible, interact with other children in the safe ways that are approved by local health authorities. This really is an opportunity to let kids resume some of their normal emotional and psychological growth and development, as well as just have some fun. And when those vaccines are available for your kids, try to take advantage of them.
All right. Kenny, over to you.
Remember that your children are resilient. This summer is going to be really important to sort of refinding some sense of normalcy and safety and doing those things in the ways that are safe, but remembering that kids are resilient and that they will bounce back, and that you don't have to feel the pressure to all of a sudden catch your kid up over the next 2 months. Because I think the last thing that we want to do, and Patrick mentioned this before, is to turn this into a high stakes situation where it's like, oh, every kid has to recoup that learning loss over the next few months or they're not going to catch up. Just remember that kids are resilient, and that we need to take our time with this and listen to each other and listen to ourselves and give each other and ourselves grace as we all try to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
All right, real quick, Patrick, 20 seconds.
Maya Angelou once said, that we might not always remember what someone told us, but we remember how they made us feel. Let's make our kids feel welcomed and included this summer, and make them feel as though that they're not the problem. The problem has been this pandemic, and we're here to help them learn and grow and have a great summer.
Great advice from all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Springgate, Kenneth Francis, and Patrick Dobard. And if you want to get another look at the information in Monica's report about summer camps and learning programs, go to WYES.org. That's our website. And then you can take a look at this program and Monica's report on the Living in the New Normal webpage, also on WYES YouTube. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good night. Thank you very much, guys.